Squad analysis and scouting can very often go hand in hand, but I've been working on some stuff that will not only help your scouting, but turn your player search screen into the ultimate analysis dashboard for your team. So let's discuss, shall we? Back in the day, I used to do full-length squad analysis videos after every single season to give us a chance to go through the squads, look at the statistics for the players, and try to find holes and ways that we can improve the team outside of the obvious. I'd even made custom views that we'd use for each and every position in the squad to get a more bespoke analysis for each player. This was, of course, all before the data hub came in and changed everything. After its introduction, I simply stopped doing them, as now the data was laid out in a beautiful, visually pleasing way, and that has improved an awful lot since its inception. In spite of that, I have used a more generic version of the squad analysis view since then, as I still like to be able to see things broken down to the pure numbers, just because that's how my brain works. In addition, it just makes it easier as well to compare large groups of players. But over the last couple of years, since the data hub's introduction, it has brought with it a huge amount of new statistics, both for chalkboard and for general stats, that can be added into the main squad view pages, and that is where our story begins. So I decided to recreate my views from years ago, but with a twist. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use them to analyze your team, an application for how you can use them to do scouting purely by data, another method in order to narrow down players you've already got scouted in other ways, and finally, a way to get that supercharged dashboard I talked about at the start of the video that we've been using on stream. Do drop a follow over there as well. I stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. Worry not as well, all the stuff I talk about in this video will be linked in the description, including a giant download pack for all the cool goodies, including this more generic squad analysis screen that I've been using mostly this year up to this point. So let's move. Instead of creating ones for each individual position in the game, which I felt was a bit overkill, I've created 7, which cover all our bases all the way from keeper up to striker. Goalkeepers and strikers get their own individual ones, as do centre backs. However, fullbacks and wingbacks are combined into one, as they often rely on the same statistics. The same applies to central and defensive midfielders, although there is some crossover between the two. Attacking midfielders get their own as well, as do wingers and wide inside forwards, all clumped into the same one, as you'll see why in a moment. For the purposes of examples, we're just going to try the fullback wingback one for a bit. And as you can see, it adds an awful lot of data to one screen. The first thing we're going to want to do is just get rid of the non-fullbacks and wingbacks. So we're obviously going to go up to these squads here, just select defenders, get rid of these. We'll select defensive midfielders too, because that's where wingbacks are under. Remove the central, and that should leave us with just the fullbacks and wingbacks. Now you might notice that because certain players can play in multiple positions, you'll have some players squeaking through that perhaps you don't want to be analyzing in these screens. So what you're going to want to do is clear your entire team selection. Any players that you do not want to be featured on those pages, just pop in the starting 11 for the moment. So I've got rid of these two who are both centre backs. So now we go back to this page, and you want to tick hide players in match squad, and that will then remove them from the search, and thus you're left only with the players that you've actually got as fullbacks and wingbacks. And you can play around with that and analyze groups of players in any way you like using that method too. So each of these views is split into different sections. You should be able to work it out pretty easily what they are, and the same will apply to the other ones for other positions. So we've got aerial and heading related stuff in this one. This is mostly generalized defensive stuff. This is more physical things like distances and sprints. This is to do with their passing accuracy and whatnot like that. This section specifically deals with crossing, so this won't be present on things like centre mids. And then you've got the sort of attacking output that you might see here when it comes to things like goals scored, which is why these sections are quite thin. You'll notice with more attacking players, you'll have more stats in these and less in the defensive ones. That's generally the plan, so you can sort of focus on a little bit more. Of course, to install these, it's the normal method. You put them in this little folder here, you go up to this bit up here, you whack it in import, and then you just drop it straight into this. Making views in FM can be a colossal pain in the arse due to things snapping all over the place, separators not going in the right spots, the weird naming conventions that you'll notice about how things like expected goals is called XG, but expected assist is called expected assists, and thus they're all over the place. Just little things like that are infuriating. But I've spent several days doing this, so you don't have to go through the same misery. But just as an example, the way that this is cool is we can now just see, isolated, which of our fullbacks is producing the best crosses from that. But it just allows you to compare players in the same position across multiple metrics, all on the same screen, with more than 2 players. And I just really love being able to do that. And if you do find a player is randomly not performing as well as they should be compared to their peers, you may then be able to look at their player traits and various attributes to try and figure out why that is. But now I want to talk about how you can use this same information for scouting new players. But before we fully dive into this, I want to give a shout out to RDF's video, which will be linked in the description, which is basically the gold standard on this particular type of scouting. So I'd massively advise you to give that a watch after this, as there's so much awesome info in there, especially if you're really interested in purely using data as a scouting tool. What I'm going to offer you here is perhaps a couple of supplementary tools that can aid you in that mission. So one of the more annoying features in Football Manager is that you'd think now that we've made those squad views, we should just be able to bring them into any page that has a view setting. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. There's obviously some stuff in the background due to the fact that this is a scouting search page that doesn't allow us to use those same views here. So what I've done is gone through and painstakingly recreated those same views from the squad screen so they can now be used on the scouting player search screen, as you can see down here. So why is this important? Because it now means you can supercharge your data-driven scouting approach by using these positional specific views combined with RDF's brilliant data-driven scouting filters to zero in on your next Moneyball signing at warp speed. These can of course be installed the exact same way as the ones from the squad screen. They are labeled as scouting, so you know that those are the ones that go on this menu. If it says it can't import it, you're probably importing the wrong one. If you'd rather use more basic filters up here and then just sort through the numbers yourself, don't forget, of course, you can sort by multiple columns by holding down Shift and selecting a brand new column will allow you to do that, and you can do as many as you like. Apologies for the fact that if you try to sort by something that's far over to the right-hand side of the screen, it will just snap all the way back across for absolutely no reason. Sometimes I am convinced that this game was uncovered in like some ancient megalithic site, Football Manager 2023 BC, if you will. But say you don't want to scout purely on the basis of stats and instead want to use their attributes as an initial sort and then look at the statistics and stuff later. Honestly, this is my preferred method at the moment because I just like the pretty colors, and the big numbers between 1 and 20 just make my dopamine receptors go, ooh. Total side note, if you didn't realize this already, but if you tick this little button down here, you can actually have the filters displayed above this, so you don't have to keep clicking in the search option every single time. So what I do here is I just crack on with my more basic scouting views. There's one for every single role in the game. There's a link in the description to a video all about these views specifically, but it is pretty much just how I do all of my manual scouting. Before you do anything else though, you're going to want to set up a brand new shortlist. You'll then have to continue once because for some reason you can't add players to it straight away if you don't. Then, if you're like me, you just go through along here. Any player that seems to catch your eye as looking a little bit fancy, just give them a little right click, add them to shortlist, the brand new shortlist, but specifically, and this is important, add them for 1 month. So once you're suitably happy that you've found a decent number of players to get on your shortlist straight off the bat, head over, of course, to the shortlist page. And you might be thinking the next step, of course, is to import the view from this player search screen over to the shortlist page. Well, yes, but actually no. So you'd think that's how it worked, but for some reason, again, you can't do that. So once again, I've had to go through and create all those views again from scratch in the shortlist page. But again, they're all in the pack, so you can import them the exact same way, except this time they'll have shortlist written in the title. So now you'll be able to see all those statistics for all the players that you've just decided that you're potentially interested in. And because you've already decided that these guys are in theory around the right range that you're looking at attribute-wise, subject to a little bit more scouting, you can now have a little deeper look at their statistics to see how they're actually doing on things like, you know, XG over performance, especially when it comes to strikers, which we're looking at right now, but obviously bearing in mind the leagues and the clubs that they're playing at the same time. But it should still allow you to compare a large amount of players in the same screen. And that's what we're trying to do here. Cut out the middleman. And then I got to thinking, is there a way that you could compare a group of players like this for a shortlist with players that are currently occupying those positions in those roles at your club currently? All on the same screen. You'd like to think that something along those lines might be in, say, I don't know, a squad planner, but alas, it does not seem to have that function, as that might have accidentally made it useful. If you do know a way to make that happen, then do let me know, because as far as I can see in the squad planner, you're very limited as to what views you can put in here, and none of these are customizable. Worry not though, as there is technically a way to make this work. It's scuffed as all hell, but it does technically work. The way you do it is with these particular commands. Obviously, the age and position stuff is just for whatever you're doing anyway. It's the next stuff that's important. Number of days left on this shortlist is an option in there for some reason, and you have to set it to at most 32. Providing you're doing this on the day of adding those players to the shortlist, it will give them 31 days, but you have to set it to 32. And that will then find the 12 players that we had on that specific shortlist. You then add an or in here, and then obviously club contains MTK Budapest. You'll need to change that to your club, of course. But that will now display on one screen all the players that were on that shortlist, as well as the 5 players that are recognized strikers at our club currently. We then go back into here and can add the striker scouting analysis view back again, and now we can actually compare all of those players together in one screen. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with things like multiple shortlists and all sorts of other stuff. There's a lot of limitations to this, but it's the best you can really kind of do in the game in its current state, I think. Don't worry, this filter will be part of the pack as always. You go to manage filters, you'll find it in there. It's the one that's called shouldn't be this difficult, and then you can bring it in like that. Make sure you put that in the filters folder, not the views. Important you make sure that you don't have this ticked, otherwise it will hide your players from the search. Sometimes no matter how many times you untick this, it will not stay unticked. If that happens to you, untick it, then toggle one of these on or off, then hit OK, and it should fix it. I came up with this during the process of actually writing this script, just to see if it was even possible, but now we know that it kind of is, and could just be useful as a means of comparing a lot of players at the same time without having to go through individual menus to do so. So the last thing left is using these same views to show how your players stack up outside of what the data hub can normally show you. It's great at providing visual context to things, but a lot of that can still be quite surface level, and if you want to go a bit deeper and actually get into the real nitty-gritty of the statistics, and the only way to truly do that is in the team and player detailed screens, and even they still offer limitations. The one big benefit there though is that they can at least separate out the league, cup and continental performances from each other. It surprises me that that stuff isn't available in the chalkboard or general stats, but maybe next year. What this last thing will let you do is use the scouting player search screen as a kind of general domestic league scouting data hub. Only thing to bear in mind, of course, is that the numbers will be slightly skewed by the fact that it is including cup and continental performances in there as well. This is actually quite a simple one. Just go to conditions, add club, and then division. It will obviously default to the league you're currently in, which is extremely useful. Then once again, make sure, of course, that you have your own players included in that. It will now bring you a thing that shows every single player that plays in your division, including your own. The great thing about this is it just gives you a hell of a lot more control because of all the custom filters you can run through the scouting search page. A good one to get you started straight off the bat would be a general one in Chalkboard, which adds the number of minutes, so you can set a nice threshold to eliminate players that haven't actually played all that much. Just adding this by default and setting it to 0 will quite literally provide you any players that have played minutes in the top flight this season. Of course, you can adjust accordingly. It's annoying that it only does 1,000-point breakdowns. You can obviously adjust them individually with one, but my god, that's going to take a while to get to 500. Good luck. And you can break down and analyze different groups of players in any way you like, which is simply not possible as far as I can tell on other screens. Say we specifically want to look at how our fullbacks have done this season compared to other fullbacks in the same league. So we're going to set it to fullbacks. We're obviously going to use our fullback scouting analysis, and now we can get a much better idea of which fullbacks are actually completing the most crosses without other players from other positions that can kind of play there getting in the way. As one of the issues with the data hub I find is that it will just take any player that can do that stuff sometimes. But it also allows you to assess things that literally cannot be done using the data hub, like for example the attacking output of centre backs, how often they're scoring, their XG, and that sort of stuff could be done in here. You can find an incredibly good goal scoring centre back like this potentially, or just see how yours stack up against other teams in the league, or the pressure and pressuring statistics for your front line potentially, which would not be available in the data hub, again because it tends to focus on the defensive players for that stuff. It's all now possible in here. There's unlimited options that you can switch around and mess with. I realize there's been an awful lot of dense stuff in this video, but I really did want to include as much as I physically could to make sure that you got some value out of this, and hopefully there's a couple of things in here that have maybe twigged an idea in your head, or maybe will just make you want to try some different stuff out in FM, because there is a lot of things that are possible, even if it requires roundabout solutions to make them work. So drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and happy analyzing data days.